You stand in front of your bathroom mirror. The steam from the shower is slowly clearing. You apply a thick layer of cooling foam. You pick up a precision-engineered 5-blade razor. One smooth stroke and the stubble is gone. It takes you less than 3 minutes. You might even complain about a tiny nick. But now I want you to look closer. Imagine that mirror is a sheet of polished copper. The steam is the humid air of the Nile. Instead of steel, you hold a piece of glass. It is black, jagged, and terrifyingly sharp. One wrong move does not just cause a nick. One wrong move opens your throat completely. If the thought of that makes you blink, welcome to the ancient why. Hit subscribe because we dive into the sharp edges of history. Our ancestors were doing this an estimated 100,000 years ago. They did it without soap cream or safety guards. Why would anyone risk their life for a smooth chin? The answer changes how you see your own reflection. In the modern world, grooming is about aesthetics. In the ancient world, grooming was a survival strategy. Think about the last time you had a bad itch. Now imagine that itch is a colony of lice. They are living in your thick, matted beard. They are spreading bacteria and making you sick. This was the reality for early human tribes. Beards were not just fashion statements. They were breeding grounds for tiny, dangerous monsters. Hygiene was the primary driver of this brutal innovation. If you lived in a freezing climate, hair was worse. A long, wet beard in sub-zero temperatures. That moisture freezes into a block of ice. That ice sits directly against your skin for hours. Suddenly, a warm face becomes a case of frostbite. To stay alive, you had to be smooth. But how do you cut hair without a blade? You look to the earth for a weapon. In volcanic regions, our ancestors found the ultimate tool. They found obsidian. This volcanic glass is nature at its most lethal. When obsidian breaks, it creates a microscopic edge. Some researchers estimate it can be sharper than a modern surgical scalpel. It can cut at a molecular level. An ancient human would flake off a thin sliver. They would hold it between trembling fingers. They would scrape it against their jaw. It was effective, but the margin for error was zero. Every morning was a gamble with a glass knife. Think about that when you feel your smooth face today. That feeling of cleanliness was bought with blood. But the innovation did not stop at glass. Coastal tribes looked toward the ocean for solutions. They found the discarded shells of clams. These were not for cutting, but for plucking. They used 2 shells as primitive tweezers. They would grab a single hair and rip it. It was a slow, agonizing ritual of endurance. Then there were the shark teeth, sharpened and used to scrape the skin raw. Our ancestors were not primitive brutes. They were scientists of their own bodies. They understood that hair was a liability. As the ages turned, metallurgy changed the game. By around 3500 BC, the Bronze Age arrived. In Egypt and Mesopotamia, the first metal razors appeared. These were often circular or rectangular copper blades. They had no handles and no safety guards. Using one required the steady hand of a surgeon. In the Indus Valley, grooming became standardized. Specialized copper razors have been found in ruins. This suggests that grooming was part of urban life. It was no longer just about survival. It was becoming a sign of civilization. But the Romans took it to a painful extreme. They used iron razors called the novacula. Iron was a massive step backward for comfort. It rusted almost immediately in the humid air. It lost its sharp edge after only a few strokes. A Roman shave was a process of controlled tearing. It left the skin raw and covered in scars. Think about your current razor burn for a second. Now imagine it was caused by a rusty iron bar. That puts your Monday morning into perspective. The Egyptians, however, were the kings of hair removal. They viewed body hair as a sign of bestial nature. To be hairy was to be like an animal. To be smooth was to be divine. They invented the art of sugaring, or halawa. They mixed sugar, lemon, and water into a paste. They applied it warm and ripped it away. This pulled the hair directly from the follicle. It is nearly the same process used in spas today. Your luxury waxing appointment is thousands of years old. But they did not stop at sugar. They experimented with sophisticated and strange chemistry. Ancient texts describe creams made of burnt bird bones. They mixed this with boiled sycamore juice. They even added bat blood for symbolic power. While the blood was ritual, the chemicals worked. The alkaline nature of these mixes broke down hair. They were among the first to use chemical depilatories. If you could not afford fancy creams, you used stones. You would take a piece of porous pumice stone. You would rub it against your skin for hours. You were essentially sanding your hair away. This was the price of looking refined. Then came the era of the great generals. Alexander the Great changed history with a shave. He noticed a fatal flaw in his soldiers. In hand-to-hand combat, enemies grabbed their beards. A beard was a handle for your own death. He ordered his soldiers to be clean-shaven. Grooming became a tactical military requirement. If this is blowing your mind so far, hit subscribe now. This led to the birth of the first barbershops. In Rome, these were known as tonstrinae. Men would gather there every single day. They would sit while a tonsor used iron blades. There was no soap and no soothing oil, only cold water and a jagged piece of metal. It was an agonizing social ritual, but it was where the news was shared. It was where politics were debated. Your modern barber talk has deep ancient roots. By the Middle Ages, the straight razor appeared. These were the infamous cutthroat razors, made of high-quality steel from Sheffield, England. They were incredibly sharp and incredibly dangerous. They required a leather strap to keep the edge. You had to sharpen it before every single use. Because they were so lethal, men rarely shaved themselves. You had to trust a professional with your life. One slip of the wrist and the story ended. DIY shaving was a luxury for the brave. It stayed this way until the late 1700s. A French cutler named Jean-Jacques Perret saw the fear. He added a wooden guard to the straight blade. This was one of the first protected razor designs. It was the spiritual ancestor of your safety razor. For thousands of years, we used only water. Shaving soap did not become common until the 1800s. The skin was left raw, bleeding, and open. This is why aftershave was such a miracle. Substances like bay rum were used as antiseptics. They burned like fire, but they stopped the rot. They prevented the infections that killed the careless. We often think of history as grand events. We think of wars, kings, and falling empires. But history is also written in the small things. It is written in the way we care for ourselves. Your morning routine carries a very old legacy. You are using tools that were forged in blood. You are connected to the first human with glass. You are connected to the soldier in the phalanx. You are connected to the Egyptian priest at his mirror. Every stroke of the blade is a memory. Every smooth surface is a small victory. We turned a survival necessity into a ritual. We turned a dangerous gamble into a habit. Your bathroom is a museum of ancient technology. Never forget the obsidian and the bronze. They are the reasons you can look so sharp. Take a deep breath and finish your routine. The world is waiting for your clean face. You are the heir to the obsidian edge. Hit the bell for more ancient secrets.